Hi everyone, I'd like to welcome you along to one of our first of a new series of classes I'll be doing alongside my normal master classes. Today we're going to be talking about some of the stuff that's more interesting to a new developer, particularly creating things from scratch. That is, setting up your environments, getting good to go to upload clothing. We're going to be using some template clothing we've recently released. If you look on our wiki, we actually have a selection of template clothing which you can use to use as the basis of your own designs. You're free to use both the meshes, the textures, and all the resource files we're providing for any purpose related to the Sinespace virtual world. If you want to sell your results, that's perfectly fine. But we're hoping that it would be a useful exercise and it'll be a bit easier to sort of get up to speed with creating content here. So today we're going to cover everything from getting Unity installed through to setting up your account to allow you to upload. Then we're going to actually tweak and customize an item that actually comes in our sample editor pack. And then finally, we're actually going to go with one of the templates and we're going to finish off with that. So to get started, I'm going to just grab my desktop. So I'm just logged in at the moment. But the first thing you need to do when working with Sinespace is that all the items and environments and regions that you see at the moment, except for those built with the in-world build tools, have been uploaded through the Unity 3D editor. Now, you may ask, why can't we just do this from the client? Why can't we go directly? And while we are adding more and more of those facilities as time goes on, we're also gaining a lot from the Unity 3D editor. It may be a fairly complicated piece of software. It's actually not as bad as you may first perceive it, but it's like Photoshop. Once you get to use Photoshop, immediately you understand that there is a lot of power tucked in underneath this interface. And if you need to do something powerful, you need to do something that really sort of pushes your content to the edge, then Unity is actually a really great tool to work with. It's going to let you do things that you have never been able to do in previous virtual worlds. Lots of things like fantastic lighting. You're going to be able to paint things like metallic and plastic and those sort of material properties onto your clothing. There's a lot of sort of power that you are going to be able to take advantage of. So that's why we actually have gone down this path, because as a content creator, if you want to make your content look the very best with the minimal amount of effort, it's a fantastic tool. It's very well written. You're not sort of hanging around clunky interfaces that were designed by a programmer on a bad day. The first things first, we just want to cover off actually getting Unity installed. Now, I've already got Unity installed, so I'm not going to go through the entire process from start to finish, but I'm going to tell you what you need to do. So, I've just got our wiki open here. We actually publish which versions of the Unity editor on our wiki that we recommend. At the moment, for people who are uploading content that is intended to be quite stable, that is to say, we know it all behaves correctly, we're recommending the version 5.64, which we've got the sort of download link here. Today we're actually going to go for a slightly more advanced version, and this is the one I'm going to recommend going forward, at least for the current period of time. Do check the wiki, because the wiki is the authoritative source here, but we're actually going to use 2017.2, which is one of the new releases that Unity have just made. And we're actually officially in the process of upgrading to that at the moment, so the official version will tick over quite soon, so I don't want to start you off with a version you're going to have to upgrade in 2 weeks. To do that, you just go to the Unity, the wiki page, and hopefully I just have not lost my internet. Nope. Okay, so if you're a Linux user, we've actually got some separate links here, but the first thing you want to do is go to the Unity download archive. Now, if you just Google Unity download archive, it will actually bring it up for you. And I'm hoping that the stream is stable. I just realized I was uploading some content at the same time, so that hopefully will help. Alright, so moving onwards. The download page you want to grab, we just want to grab the latest version of 2017.2. So this is 2017.2.1, and that's fine. So you just go to the downloads, you grab the installer, and then it will download a small installer that will actually download the process of actually getting the full version intact. So I'm just going to open this up very quickly. And you'll see here you've got a bunch of options. It'll actually ask you to agree to the terms of service, etc. And it'll give you a whole bunch of options to tick. The default tick boxes are actually fine. So while I've got a few more here, this is because I've already had it installed and I need them all, but you actually don't. So the default array that it actually leaves ticked is everything you need. So you just go ahead and install that. It will take a little while to install, so go grab a coffee if you're doing this at home. You can pause and come back when we're done, but we're actually going to skip ahead to the next step, which is actually getting Unity itself open, up and running, and creating your content. So the first thing you need to do is that when you actually open this for the very first time, it'll actually ask you to log in and register. You just need a Unity 3D account. They're free, there's no price. You just mark yourself as an individual. If you are doing this as a hobby, if you're doing this through a company, then just mark that through, but it's a free product for the most part. If you need some sort of more advanced features, there are pro plans and so forth, but for working with Sinespace, especially as a new creator, absolutely not. Yeah, it's... So once you actually sort of registered and logged in, you actually get this new project screen. So we're going to actually create a new project today, and we're going to do that in a new folder. So I've just got a folder up over here, which is my learner class resources. We'll just create one for learner project. My ability to type today is somewhat limited, but we're just going to create that folder. Now you can create a new folder there from Unity. We're just going to call this learner class, and we're just going to leave all the other bits and pieces by default, leave that to 3D. Everything else is okay, so we just hit create project. And as we do this, Unity is going to open up. It'll just take a second to sort of create the basic project, and we should be up and running in a moment. Now the next thing you're going to need is something called our editor packs. Now the editor packs are sort of our extensions to Unity that let you upload content directly from Unity into the world. These ones have a bunch of sample content attached to them, but they're sort of really the bulk of what we provide as a content creator. We sort of give you like 300 extra tools and things that you can play with. So once we've got Unity up and running, it's quite a basic experience. Now this layout that I've got here is actually not what you're going to see, and there's going to be one change that I recommend you make. So I'm just going to quickly save my layout just to make sure it's okay. I can get this one back. 2013, because you can actually customize how Unity looks, but we're going to go to the default. And when Unity opens for the first time, you're actually going to see it like this. In fact, there will be an additional services tab up here. So it'll actually, don't know where the services tab has hidden itself. It might have permanently hidden itself on it. There we go. So actually it'll look like this. You'll have this services thing on the side. You'll actually want a tab. Just click the inspector in this top right corner. And that actually has what you've got selected. It'll give you all the properties of what you're playing with. Now, as I said before, this looks complicated. It's the same as when you open sort of Photoshop for the first time. There's a lot of menus and buttons and things. We can ignore 90% of them. In fact, for most of the time, there's just so much functionality here that you will probably only ever work with 5 or 10% of it at a time. It's similar to Photoshop as well. I mean, Photoshop has things for HDR photography and things, but most people aren't using that. But if you are, there is the depth of tools and power available to you. So the first thing we need to do is we actually need to get our editor pack. So again, we'll just go back to our wiki. We'll just go to the wiki on Sinespace. We have the latest creator downloads. Now the one here we've got is 10.8. Again, we are about to update to 2017.2. So actually, I'm going to recommend a newer version called 12.8. It's actually available on our blog. We've got 12.4 that also works, but the 12.8 is available, and I'll post the link to that one shortly once I'm done with this class as well for people who want to test it. Now this is a slightly more experimental pack. There may be a few bugs in it, but we're hoping that it is a release candidate, so it should be going out fairly shortly. And this actually adds a whole bunch of things, including our new character models, which are the new high detail characters. And I'll actually show those off in a second, but what we do is when we actually double click the file that we download, Unity will pop up and ask you to import it. So we just let everything go as is. It's got a whole bunch of things that sort of get attached to it. We're just going to click the import button. And this will just take a second. And what it's doing is it's actually sort of unpacking them. The file that we provided is very similar to a zip file. It's just a file that contains a whole bunch of other files. And when you actually unpack them, or you look at your project directory, so this is the project directory we created. If we go into the assets folder, you'll actually see everything that we're unpacking in here. And one of the cool things about Unity is that if you say have a Photoshop file like a .psd, you can actually open it in Photoshop from this folder. You can make changes to it, you can save it, 3D models, textures, the whole lot. And when you actually tab back into Unity, it'll detect the changes, instantly reload them, so you immediately get a preview of what's going on. In fact, some of the tools that are available that sort of have extra compatibility with Unity, like the Substance Painter suite and Maya, the 3D modeling software, they actually now have a live link feature as well, so you can actually watch in real time as you work in one program how it looks in Unity with all the lighting and the material effects and things applied to it. So we're just going to wait a second for this to import. It will take a moment, but hopefully it won't take too long. And when this is done, we'll actually get a little bit of a pop-up, and that pop-up will say this is the editor pack, the version, and what we've changed in it. It also contains a whole bunch of sample art resources. So we're just going to wait a minute for this to finish. As I said, hopefully it won't take very long. As I said, we're doing this one from scratch, so this is the same experience that you guys will have. We won't sort of skip forward. To actually have the sample art directory, I don't know if I actually got this stuff. So you can actually begin to see that we've got a clothing template in here. I think it's just created the folders. Oh, it has actually created the FBXs. Okay, cool. So we've actually packed a bunch of clothes in there as well. But the one we're going to play with today is actually this t-shirt template. So while I wait for this to import, I'm going to pull this up in Photoshop. So what we've done is we've actually made a template. And just want to make sure, I may have not packed the so we've got the normal map there, we've got the occlusion here, and we can actually use this as the basis for our design. This is a blank t-shirt, so it actually doesn't have the front on textures, and this is going to be our first item that we work with. What we've actually provided is we have a male t-shirt, so if we open this one up, we'll actually be able to see we've actually got the design of the t-shirt, so it's a very simple one. We have a female version that actually has the same UV layout as the male one, so this will be our first item we play with, and that way you can actually create a clothing item that works on both genders without having to make additional textures. Additionally, we also have the new LOD support, and that's a new feature that we've got coming in this version of the editor pack, and it lets you actually create high detail clothing. So if we sort of compare and contrast, you can see that there's quite a bit more smoothness in this one, and this one I think is targeting 30,000 polygons, whereas this one is only targeting 1,000 or so. It's really quite low poly by comparison. Now the reason we've actually sort of added this LOD support is that desktop players can handle a much higher quality of content than some of the other more limited players that we have available. Like for instance, the web viewer would unfortunately choke if we threw the high detail clothing at it, but and also mobile is a similar case when we release those apps. Just going to tab back to Unity for a second. Here we go. You'll get this pop up about halfway through the import, and it'll just ask you to make a backup of your project. If you're doing an upgrade, you can just click I made a backup, go ahead. What it's doing is it's actually updating the software to account for any changes that Unity themselves have made in the engine. For reference, content that's actually built with any version of Unity is always backwards compatible. That is to say that if you build a project in Unity 5, it should always work in Unity 6. It should always work in all subsequent versions that come out. So this little screen will pop up and it'll just give you some sort of basics of what we've changed recently. I'm just going to wait a minute just for this to finish ticking along its import. This process does take a minute. It's a good one to go grab a coffee or a drink on. And what we've actually got here as well is we've got a bunch of buttons for quick starting projects. So if you want to create a new blank reach and you just click that button and it'll give you the basics. And we might even have a little bit of time. It depends on how long it's going to take to work on our template materials. But we can create a couple of things today, hopefully. We have done a one on the vehicle quick start as well. So if you want to create vehicles, and vehicles actually is a fairly wide topic. You can create everything from actually sort of driven vehicles like cars and whatnot to boats to things like horses. I mean, actually, animals you can actually fake through the use of a vehicle engine. All you're doing is really just animating the vehicle. Fundamentally, on the structure side, it's actually very similar to another vehicle type. So you'd probably just create something with a wheel with lots of springs on it. That would be the internal structure of what a horse might look like to the engine. So hopefully not too much longer. Just ticking along on this last bit. I probably should have checked back to see if it was waiting me while I was talking about the other things. So what it's doing now is it's actually just unpacking all the content that was in our zip file, but it's doing a little bit more than that. What it's actually doing is it's loading all those files. So it's actually processing them and saying, okay, this is how it should be represented when it gets rendered on the video card and things like that. So here we go. The importing small assets is the last little bit, so it won't take too much longer. Almost done. That's where I think I spend most of my day actually sitting in front of progress bars of one kind or another. Thankfully, these ones aren't too long. Okay. Tiny little bit left to go. Actually, I swear that I joked earlier today that a watched progress bar never finishes, and it's certainly the case today. You'll only have to do this once, just for reference. The only time you'll actually ever have to sort of wait for this is if you're upgrading our editor packs to new versions. Honestly, you don't need to do that too often. Once every 6 months is often plenty. It depends if you're chasing sort of the very latest features that we've released. This 12 series of editor pack, the principal feature is the new high definition avatars. However, there are, which actually you're importing right now. However, there are a couple of other changes, particularly with scripters. We've added some new functions and things to our standard library that you can take advantage of. We've also made some changes to the actual runtime itself to introduce sort of wider compatibility and more consistency among the API systems. So we'll just wait, this is almost done. And then we can start talking about actually sort of building the content. So I just want to sort of get this set up, so that way we actually preview what we're working on as we go. I could actually almost begin working on the design of this item, but we'll wait a moment. Okay, so now I've actually got it imported. You'll see the design. Oh, maybe we have to wait a second. Are we done? We're done. Okay, just give it half a second. It's just sort of finalizing, and we should be almost good to go. So what I'm going to do, just while that finally ticks over, is begin to actually work on the design. So what we're going to do is we're just going to use this as a template for how this clothing item is. So we've actually got separate normal maps for male and female, but what we have is we've got an underlying diffuse map that actually is the how it's actually rendered. So we actually separated the occlusion here, which is the sort of the shading, from the base mesh, and that actually has two advantages. The first is that it's more consistent across lighting experiences. So here we go. We've got our Unity project set up. So I'll just briefly, before I go back onto that one, explain a little bit of what we've got in front of us here. So I'm just going to close out this one. Actually, no, I'm not. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click the Install Editor Pack button. So it'll just take a second to do. And what that's doing is it's actually, it may take a second to run through. What that's doing is it's actually setting all the settings for Unity to be as close as possible to what we have in our viewer. So when what you upload in here looks the same as what we're doing elsewhere. The next thing we want to do is we're just going to click the log into editor button. And what this is going to do is this is actually just going to log in with your Sinespace username. I'm just going to go with my password. I'm just going to click the login button. And if that's working, you'll see a little key is valid down there, and we can just ignore that. So what that's done is that's just connected the editor to the in-world environment that we've got available to us. Okay, so now we're done with this. I'm just going to close this out. So I'm going to explain a little bit of what we've got in front of us. The first thing is the scene view. This is sort of your 3D editor of sorts. And on the sidebar, we've got a panel named Hierarchy. The hierarchy is the list of everything that's in the environment that we're looking at the moment. So you usually have sort of like a workshop scene if you're working on clothes that you can use with the lighting and things set up the way you want. Down the bottom, we have the project panel. Now the project panel is basically a copy of what we're looking at in the Windows Explorer or Finder on Mac. It's all the files and things that are actually associated with your project. So you can actually right click on these and go show in Explorer or show in Finder and see those folders in the same way. And that way you can just save files directly into your project. You don't actually have to have separate copies that you import. You actually work on the live copies in real time. So you actually create a Photoshop document and you just save it in your project directory, and then Unity will be able to read it and process. So it's a much faster process to work with as a designer. Okay, so we're just going to go into the sample art directory. So we've got this sample art one here, and we have clothing. So we've got avatar art, and we've got t-shirt template. So immediately you can see here we've actually got the female t-shirt models, and you can just drag around. For reference, camera controls in Unity, it's right-click, similar to Sinespace. Right-click rotates the camera around, and then while you're holding right-click, you can use the WSA and D keys to move the camera around. So similar controls to how Sinespace works, and it's the same on all these preview images and things. There is a lot of complexity on the sidebar here. As I said before, you can ignore 95% of it. If you don't understand what something means, you can safely ignore it. So I'm just going to drag this into the scene. This is one of our clothing items. This is a female t-shirt. I'm just going to change the position. So up in the corner here, you can actually set the position of it very accurately if you want to. So I'm just going to set it to 0, 0, 0. And if you hit the F button while you've got something selected, it'll focus the camera on it. Now the first thing we need to look at is just the lighting. The lighting from this one is coming from the back, because that's how the lighting's been set up. I'm just going to change the rotation of the directional light, just so it's in the front. We'll get a bit more clarity on it, so we've got a better preview to work with. So this is the female variant of the shirt. If we drag the male t-shirt in here as well, I'm just going to set the position of this one to 0, 0, 0 as well, and it's just going to sit on top. I'm just going to move that to the side. Okay, so we've actually got the same object now. When you select the item, you just click on it twice, and it'll actually give you the what's called the skin mesh renderer, which is what actually is displaying it. And you've got this little material down the side. You can actually just tab that open, and it'll give you all the details on it. So if you want to say recolor that one to red or change it around or whatever, we can do that. And that's just tinting the texture. We actually don't even have a texture on there yet. The ones we do have on are a normal map, which is used to indicate bumps and things to the renderer. So you actually don't need to render them with polygons. You can render them into the texture maps, and it'll respond with lighting accordingly. And we've got the occlusion, which is sort of our shadows and things. Now the reason you might want to separate occlusion, so if I just turn that off, you'll see, you can sort of see the difference. It's sort of a little bit of a subtle effect, but it is there. And if I set the normal map to 0, you can sort of see the occlusion, what we're getting. So it's just the folds and creases and things. What you'll notice is that the occlusion shadows are actually only showing up when they're in shadow. That's the benefit of separating them, is that it's actually a bit more accurate. If we didn't do that, then the model would look, we'd have to bake the shadows in, and as the avatar moves around the world and through different lighting scenes, the lighting wouldn't update with it, and it'd look a little bit odd. We've got these two models in front of us. This one, I'm just going to set the color from gray to white, so it's consistent with the female. I'm just going to drag the male t-shirt into the normal map slot and the occlusion slot, and there we go. So we've got these two models, and these are all going to use the same UV layout underneath. So I'm just going to grab this in Photoshop. I'm going to do a save as on this, and I'm going to find a folder. So I'm just going to go into my t-shirt template folder. I'm going to create a new folder in here. I'm just going to call this Learner. This is in the project folder, incidentally. I'm going to call this one, I'm just going to keep it as a PSD. I'm going to call this Learner t-shirt. For those watching along and have missed something, I will actually be posting an uploaded version of this video very soon. So you better pause and take a look if you're working along at home, because I know I do work at a somewhat of a faster pace. So if we're just doing this in the search in the project view, we'd go for Learner. We've got this Learner t-shirt texture. Now this is the same as the normal map texture. So I'm just going to drag this into the albedo slot, and that's what we call the sort of the diffuse or the primary texture. It's slightly different because Unity has a new rendering engine to the old style. So it's been renamed mostly to albedo, but there we go. So now we've got our base texture. Now, because we've got the lighting and things baked in, we can actually make this a white texture. And I just save that file change and then go to Unity, and you'll see it immediately flipped up and updated. So what we can do is we can paint. Now, I'm going to use this one just as a guide to know where things are. This is actually the front of the t-shirt over here, and that's the back. And you can sort of see that because the chest is a little bit more protruded on the map. So I'm just going to keep that roughly visible, just so I know the bounds of where I'm working on. But first things first, I'm going to paint a smiley face on our t-shirt. I'm just going to save that. Oops. And there we go. That is the sort of the basics of customizing the templates. That's a fairly straightforward process. Now we could spend a bit of time actually do sort of detailed texturing and things, and that's entirely up to you to come up with original designs and things you want. The process is, I hope, relatively straightforward. So now we've actually got our textures and our models. What we can do is we're going to upload them. Now, there's a couple of ways we can do this. We've added a new tool which is a bit more experimental. I'm not going to cover that just because it is a little bit experimental, but we've got our Quickstart import clothing function. So it's just in the top here. You can go space, Quickstart, and import clothing, and you can actually select a game object or something, and it'll set it up as clothing. In fact, what I'll do is I might just quickly try that. I think it's okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the male t-shirt model here. I'm just going to drag this into the slot. Is that going to? No, I'm going to have to do it from the. project view. So okay, so we'll do this the normal way. So the quick way of making a clothing item, this is going to be our female t-shirt we're going to use. I'm going to, in fact, just for reference, these animators are unnecessary. You don't have to remove them, but you should. If you just right click on there and hit remove, I'll get rid of the animator. That's just in case you actually want to build in animations. Like for instance, I've got a hat in world that's got a kitty cat attached to the top of it, and the kitty cat moves around independently as part of the clothing item. That's what that stuff is there for, but for this we're not going to use them. So the first thing you do is you just click the add component button. So I've just selected the model there, the base element there. I'm just going to add component and I'm going to go clothing. And when you see that, there's a whole bunch of ones that come up. But the big one we want to use is the clothing item settings. And this is the thing that actually tells us how a clothing item is put together. Now in the 12 series of editor packs, we've actually got this new version of the clothing item settings. So it looks a bit different to some of our older tutorials. What we've hoped is that as we've added more and more types of clothing and things that you can actually upload, so we added tattoos and things, we've had to add more and more elements to the old one. So what we've done is actually just organized everything into drawers. So the defaults for most things are actually already good to go. As you can see here, we've got it's set to female. The type is set to rigged clothing. That's because this particular item has been already rigged, that is skin weighted or painted. If you don't know what this means, it's probably fine to leave it as is. The other type is attachments. Attachments can be attached to a bone and they don't actually move with the avatar other than the very basic movement. So for instance, they don't bend or warp as the avatar moves through the layers. The next things we need to do is arrange the fitting slots. Now the fitting slots indicate sort of where a clothing item is worn. We have some features that allow clothing items to be worn over the top of each other. So for instance, you wear a jacket over a t-shirt and the t-shirt should get tucked underneath the jacket. That's using our layer system, so you do need to actually tag what type of clothing this is, so we know whether to actually treat it, how to order the items from top to bottom, or from furthest out away from the skin to the skin. So the default is underwear, which would be fairly close to the body. Skin tight is the closest, but I would say this is probably counts as close fitting. So we'll just pick the close fitting, and when we do, actually begin to see the actual base avatar here. So we see the female avatar. You can get a wireframe of how this is fitting on the model. And we're going to pick what kind of slots it has. Now these are used in our wardrobe, so that if you wear one t-shirt and then you wear another t-shirt, it doesn't try to wear two t-shirts at a time. The actual way that works is it combines both the layer and the slots. So for instance, a t-shirt and a jacket might occupy the same slots, and we want to wear both of those at the same time, whereas two things on the same layer we don't necessarily want to be worn at the same time. So what we can do is we're just going to pick which ones this is. So we're going to say this is going to occupy the chest. That's what's been covered here. If this was a longer t-shirt, I would probably also pick the left arm and right arm. But I would say this is covering the chest, and that's probably all it's actually covering, really. So what I'm going to do is it's got upper chest as well. So I'll cover those two. So chest traditionally covers the stomach area, and then upper chest covers the breast area. Okay, so what we have here is we've also got some various modes for how that tucking and layering goes. The defaults are fine. If you don't understand them, don't touch them, because there is quite a bit of complexity involved in tweaking those ones, and that's really a topic for more advanced clothing designers. You don't really need to mess with them. Okay, so the rest is we're going to make one change, and that's the materials. Since we're only going to upload one variation of this clothing item, and we're going to click the tick keep materials always under the materials tab, and what that does is it forces the textures not to get thrown away when we actually upload it. So it's possible to create something called a clothing pattern, and when you do clothing patterns, you can create different color variants and things of the basic clothing item, and those color variants will download their textures separately from the base mesh. So that's the default behavior, but if you're not doing that, which we're not, just click the keep materials always, and it'll just make sure it doesn't throw away the textures that are already attached to the model when it uploads them. The rigging, now this has already been pre-weighted for us, so we don't need to worry about it, but we have an automated rigging system built in. So if you create a clothing item in a 3D tool, you actually don't need to skin weight it. You just bring it in, and then on this rigging tab, there's a button normally that says convert to skinned, and that will do all the rigging and weighting for you automatically. There is a bunch of other settings here that are available, for instance, the new level of detail system and such. I'm not going to cover those today. We will come back and probably cover those in a more advanced class at some point in the future. Finally, the Miscellaneous tab, we don't need to worry about any of these. Most of these to do with shoes, like for instance, if you want to arch the feet when they're worn, for instance, high heel shoes, this is sort of a way to do it. And you can also offset the avatar's center of mass. So if you've got platform shoes that should lift the character up, you can specify how many centimeters it should be actually raising the character. So all of those we're going to leave alone. We've got a bunch of other bits and pieces along here for different types of clothing items. We're not going to use any of those. I'm going to just click on the submission tab. I'm just going to click the prepare button, and this will just take a second. So this is what it's doing is actually we're pre-calculating a lot of information about the clothing item. The main thing we're pre-calculating is going to be sort of how the clothing item is actually worn on the character. We do a bit of work beyond just the normal weighting and skinning, and this sort of covers how they interact when two items of clothing are worn at once and things like that. So that's all you need to do there. Finally, this is optional. It's not something you need to worry about, but there's this performance score tab. If you're curious about how this clothing item is going to be worn on a low-end machine and such, this information will give you some ideas on how much it's going to cause lag to surrounding avatars and things. We actually have quite a bit of hopefully useful information here attached that will let you sort of tweak and optimize your clothing and reduce its overall score. Overall, we found these scores are fairly accurate. So this is a quite lightweight bit of clothing. Generally, the range that clothing should be fitting into is between sort of 500 and 1,000 if you can. But we can cover a bit more of that later on. Okay, so finally, we have our item. It's good to go. So we're just going to do one more thing, and that's upload it. So to upload this clothing item, we're just going to add a virtual good. So you just search for that in the add component button. Now, this particular form is actually our marketplace form. This is how it gets listed in the marketplace, how we decide where in your inventory it's supposed to go, what categories and things it has. So what you need to do is you just need to fill out these forms until all the red errors are gone away. So first things first, the type of item must be clothing if you're uploading clothing. So you can click the Fix Now button, it will automatically change. So this one's almost good to go, but there is a warning here that it's got no category. If we want it to appear in our inventory, which we do, we just need to pick a category. So in this case, I'm just going to pick one, clothes. It'll count as a top, and it would be a shirt. So we've done that, and the warning's gone away. The content rating one is everyone. It's suitable for everyone, but if you're doing content that's mature, please make sure to tag it appropriately. Okay, the next one is the details. Now the details are actually how it looks in the store listing. So we're just going to give it a name. So we're going to call this, sorry, that's the wrong one, Smiley T-shirt. And it's going to be a T-shirt. Brand is going to be Adam. And that has filled out all the bits and pieces we need, so the details have gone away. Pricing. So I'm going to set this item as not for sale, so it's not actually going to go into our storefront. But if you leave those unticked, then you need to specify how much it's going to cost in each currency. Now, if you mouse over these fields, you actually get a bit more information about what they are. So if you're stuck, just try and mouse over something; it'll give you a bit more information. We're going to allow this use of promotions. If I was selling it, for instance, we could say it can get up to a 50% discount in a promotional sale or something like that. And those are sales that are run by the marketplace itself. They're not run by you individually. If you want to reprice items and things, you can. But this information's just for us to know it's okay to discount the item if we do, for instance, a winter sale or something like that. We can untick that one again. Okay, next one is icons. Now, we need to specify, so I'm just going to quickly save this object to disk. Now, right now, this object only exists in this workshop scene area that we exist. It's actually not a file yet that's been saved. So to save it, we need to do something called convert it to a prefab. So what we're going to do is we're going to click the Fix Now button here on the warning that gives us that. And we'll just click the yes. So what this is doing is, it should be, if we're lucky, it should have converted the spreadsheet. If that hasn't in this particular case. So the way you do that by hand is, we'll just give this a name. We'll just rename it, Smiley T-shirt. We'll just drag that into the project view. When we drag it into the project view, it's basically the equivalent of saving. So we've now got this version here. And I have done something stupid. I have done something horribly stupid. Sorry, I need to quickly reset this up. This is, as I said, we did have a bug. So that is upper chest, All the rest I think we left alone. We'll just keep the materials. Virtual good. Just give it fix now, clothing, items, clothes. So if you've got missing earlier, you've got a chance to catch up. Detail, spike. Oops, let's do that again. That's me touching my mouse on my keyboard. Okay, shit. Adam, okay, pricing, sale, icons. Okay, so we're just going to click apply in the top right. Now when we click apply, it's just going to make the changes that we've made to the scene copy and copy them back to the versions on disk. So when we select the version on disk, we've now got the identical information. We're just going to go to the icons tab, and it's going to give us some warnings that our icons are missing. Now this is not a problem if you're uploading items for your own testing. You can upload without icons, but if you want it to actually go onto the live version, live server, you actually do need to attach these icons to your item. Now we've conveniently added this auto generate button, and if you click take screenshots, I'm not going to save the scene. Actually, maybe I will save the scene. I'll save it under here. So it goes clothes test. It's just going to go into a new scene temporarily on its own, and it's just going to take some screenshots of the item. So in this case, you can sort of see it's taken a product photo that you can use for your store listings automatically. Now you can actually customize this scene for reference. It's actually a scene that's in your project. So if you want to be able to, for instance, tailor what backdrop and lighting and things your items will get taken in pictures, you can actually just edit this scene. But we'll just go to the clothes template again. So we've now got this one. We'll just select this, and we've just selected the version on disk. So we've got icons now available. Now the only one that's missing is a brand icon. Now you need to build this yourself in Photoshop. So it's just a 140 by 60 pixel PNG. Now this is not required in order to get this up on the test server, so I'm not going to drag it in. But if you do, you just sort of drag the item, drag the screenshot in there. This would look a bit odd, but there we go. The warning's gone away. Now you can upload with warnings in place. That's the sort of orange, but you can't upload with errors, which are the red ones. Finally, we're just going to go into the author tab, and we're just going to fill in the developer name. So the developer name will be Adam. Oops, how do I keep doing this? Sorry, it's my keyboard misbehaving. There we go. And the copyright, you just specify who owns the copyright to this one. So in this case, it's, oh, my keyboard is not behaving. Sign, wave, entertainment. There we go. Okay, finally, so we'll say 2018, Sign entertainment. Okay, finally, we are good to go. So we can actually just hit this upload button. It'll take a second. It's just going to register on the Curator website, which is our sort of management interface that you can use to check the status of your items, how many sales you've made, and so forth. So this is just uploading. That didn't take very long at all. We'll give it a minute or two, and it's good to go. Now, if we go to the Curator website, you'll get a bunch of emails just starting now, incidentally, because it will actually start to upload. I'm just going to go here. Okay, and we're going to go, no, go away. We can actually see the items list, and we'll see that I've got my smiley t-shirt. You can see it's just in processing. It'll take a couple of minutes, and it will then be available as soon as that's in place. Just while we're waiting on that, we're actually going to skip over, and we're now going to talk about some of the more advanced clothing templates and things. So this is the basic process that you need in order to upload an item, but it's really sort of not the magical shiny thing that you're going to look at. For that, we're actually going to go to the clothing template section of the wiki, and I'm just going to close it. Well, I'm going to go to the wiki. Now, if you go to the clothes portal on the wiki, so you just scroll down a little bit until you get to clothing. You just click clothing. On the right-hand side here, we have a bunch of clothing resource files. These are some of the template clothing you might recognize from our shop. So you can download here, and you actually just download the template textures, and you'll download the FBX file, which is the 3D model that's attached to it. Now I've already downloaded one. I picked one out that is an item that I usually am wearing on my avatar, though I haven't later. So I'm just going to grab the bomber vest. Now this is the zip file that I grabbed. You can see here that there's just sort of a collection of files. So we've actually got this men's bomber jacket. I'm just going to extract this one into a new folder in here. So I'm just going to make a new folder, create folder, and call this one bomber template. Show it in Explorer. Okay, so let's go up here. Okay. So as you can see, the model and the basics. So I'm going to go to the bomber shirt. I'm just going to drag this into my test scene here, as you can see. And we've got a basic material attached to it. Now again, if you just click on it again, it'll load up the things. This actually doesn't have rigging information attached to it already. It's just an unrigged model, but we can easily sort of add the rigging. We'll do that as part of the upload of this particular item. Again, I'm just going to tint it back up to white, and I'm going to drag one of these textures on, so you've got the albedo texture there. As you can see, this is the basic item that we're going to work with. This item was designed quite a while ago, so it actually doesn't have information relating to the sort of material properties, so you can't really tell which bits are metal, which bits are cloth, and so forth. So when we drag the normal map in, that's the bump map, you'll see this little warning that it's not marked as a normal map. Just click the fix now whenever that comes up, and then the bump information will come in correctly. So very basic design, but from this we're going to actually design a more detailed t-shirt very quickly using Substance Painter. Now one of our fantastic creators has done some work for us and ported across Substance template files for all of these resources. They're actually going up and not being uploaded at the moment, so they'll go up onto the wiki soon, and they'll let you use a Substance Painter file. It's already been pre-configured for the clothing, so it's really easy to get started. So we're just going to go with that today. So thank you, Trilo, for doing that. We'll just go into the bomber vest. So I've just got the file here, and I'm going to fire up Substance Painter. Now, for those not familiar, we're actually doing a competition with it at the moment. We've just extended the deadline a week because a couple of people had some problems uploading stuff. We will not extend it again. So if you're actually interested in a free year's license to this, we do have a competition running, and the details are on the blog. But for now, we're just going to open this one up. Now, this should be pre-configured with the model, as you can see here. I'm not going to update my install. And as you can see here, this is the model as it is. Now, it's a little bit shiny, but otherwise it's okay. Now, the reason it's shiny is because the default material is just tagged with with no real shine to it. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to paint this one, and we're going to make it a little bit more interesting. So first things first is I'm just going to add a new fill layer, and this is just we're going to change some of the roughness. The roughness is indicating how shiny this is. So a rougher material is less shiny, and if you go watch the lighting tutorials, we can explain exactly why that's the case. So here we go. Our basic model. Now we've actually got folders in here already. You can sort of see that I've got all the areas conveniently attached. So we actually got, for instance, the zipper here. Now zippers should probably be metals. So if you expand that folder, we can find the fill layer. I'm actually going to change it to be a metal. There's two ways we could do this. We could either use a prefab material down here, like for instance these various ones, or we can actually just create the material by hand by editing these values. So for instance, a silver one would be kind of white for its base color, and then we just set the roughness down fairly low and the metallic quite high. And now we've got something that's whoops, where's the keys for Substance Designer? Sorry, 1 second. Okay. I have to get used to every 3D modeling app has its own different camera controls. We can see now that it sort of reflects because it's now been marked as both metallic and quite smooth, so it's very shiny. If we wanted a more dull metal, we can actually lower the roughness, and you can sort of see we can increase the roughness, and it'll get duller. So that's a more dull metal there, probably closer to how it would look in real life, and maybe probably sort of be a little darker. So if you're going with that, finally you can sort of play with it quite a lot. You can change, for instance, the base color. We could even do something like tint, add some scratches and things. There actually is a sort of bunch of grunge maps here, so we could just add a fill layer, and I'm going to untick everything except the color. I'm going to set that to, so it looks a little bit like a textured surface. I'm just going to lower the transparency a little bit, so we've got a bit of roughness on our thing, and that looks closer to, I'm not really sure that's quite right, so I have to tweak a few of these things. Oops. Okay. All right, so with that in place, we're going to go off and texture the rest of this. So we've got our little metallic bit. Now the first thing we'll do is the shirt. it's probably one of the easiest things to do. So we've actually got a normal map and things baked in here already conveniently, so I'm going to leave this mostly alone. What I will do is I will color it and I will give it a bit of texture to it. So if you look in the materials tab in Substance Painter, and this is something you don't necessarily need to play with, there is all sorts of prefabbed fabric and things. So I'm just going to grab a rough fabric there and see how that looks. Okay, maybe that's not quite, that's probably a little bit too denim. We'll find one we like. Makes it look a bit different, so I'm going to change the UV scale. Yeah, maybe that's not very good. Maybe just increasing the scale on that will work. There we go. So now I've got a more fabric-y texture attached to this one. I'm going to start playing with the colors and things. So what we'll do is we'll actually just add a new fill layer above it. And we'll just, again, just untick everything. We can play with what color and things we want this shirt to be. Quite a dark color I think will look best. And we can then paint some things on top of this. So if I want to add a paint layer, where is it? That layer. I can then actually take some of these materials and paint over the top of it. So for instance, say I wanted to paint a weird sort of splotch or something on it. I can find one that I like. Say we'll grab fingerprints, just make it a little bigger. We only want to apply on this shirt layer. What I'll do is I'll just paint this in red. And I'm going to leave the other values alone, so I'm just going to untick all the ones we're not using. And this way I can actually paint directly onto the shirt. Now what you can do is all sorts of actually really cool patterns by doing it this way. So that might be a bit of an interesting design. Now the vest we might want to do something a bit more interesting with. So that it's by default kind of plasticky here, but these templates and things are fantastic. If anyone's heard me sort of exclaim loudly why I love Substance Painter, it's really this to begin with. It's the ability to sort of take any element and really manipulate it. So we could actually make a metal jacket, for example, and immediately sort of see that feels a bit more metal. We could tweak exactly how shiny it should be. So this jacket is something. I'm not sure quite what it is, but it's interesting. We're just going to play through the colors. So for instance, we could make a jacket that looked like this. And when you look at this in the in-world environment, oops, don't want to do that. That should be quite an impressive looking jacket when it's uploaded. So I think we are not quite sure what we want to do to this one. We'll maybe make that a pattern on the top. So what I might do is actually might mask that layer. So I'll add another fill layer below it. And this one, yeah, that white works for now. I'm just going to add that below that one. And then I'm going to add a mask to it. So I'm just going to add a black mask. So you're right, going to add black mask. And then what I can do is actually add something called a generator. Or actually a fill, sorry. We'll add a fill to that one. And this one's currently set to half, so it's sort of blending halfway between that sort of metallic and the white, but that's not what we want. We actually want to use a pattern. So what I might do is I might go with, I don't know what patterns we've got available to us, but we've got a few of them. The procedurals category is quite good for the more interesting patterns. So what I'm going to do is try that one. I'm going to drag that one in. Might change how often it's tiling. So some of these are quite sort of interesting designs that you can quickly whip up. For reference, there is also a 30-day trial of Substance Painter, so if you decide you like it, it's a great software, and the company that makes it is fantastic. I'm just going to poke around with this one until I'm super happy with how it's going to look. I have a feeling like something like that might look quite cool, but it would have to be a black background on the layout. So we might do that, and I'll just change the fill layer here. Just make that a bit of a black design. We could even play around with these. This is where we get trapped down the rabbit hole of building cool looking things. I may have picked wrong on that hexagon pattern. As I said, it's a trap. we will get easily sort of sidetracked into playing around with this until we get something that looks cool. Okay, so that might be our base pattern there. It's certainly distinctive. Now, how these things tile and so forth is something that's sort of a bit more up to you on exactly how they will behave. You can get to the case of sort of gilding the lily at some point as well. Anyone who's played any of the Saints Row games will recognise that style of using the fleur-de-lis. Okay, so we're done with this one. This one has already been all set up, so we should be able to just export this one straight into Unity. So the quick way to do that is just click File, Export Textures. Now we just need to pick a folder to export into, so I'm just going to use my my bomber vest, so I'm just going to create a new one for Shiny Bomber. Just going to use that folder now, and I'm just going to paste it into here. Use that folder, and we're just going to use all the default settings here. That's fine. The Unity 5 standard metallic is the right configuration to use, as there's actually one built in, and it should all be good to go. So if we click export, and just wait a moment, it'll have exported, and we just tab back into Unity, and Unity will go, hey, I found a bunch of files, and import them. So we've got this shiny bomber shirt here, and what we can see immediately is that when we begin dragging these into the settings, we'll begin to look very similar to how we had it. Now there's going to be some subtle differences here in how the lighting, it feels a little bit flatter in here, and that's actually because we've got no reflection probes in this scene. So if we actually add reflections and things to it, it'll suddenly look a bit closer to how it is. A real scene, for instance, like if we go into our welcome center that's got reflection probes, will look the same as it does in Substance Designer. Some scenes are better than others. It depends a little bit on the scene author to make sure they've got everything set up correctly if you want everything to look the best inside them. But one of the great ways of working with this workflow is that avatars will pick up ambient lighting conditions and things from the environment. Oh, sorry, the last thing we're going to do is we could just alter the normal map. There actually is one attached, so I think this one should be the same. And I'm going to go ahead and upload this one. So as I mentioned before, this one is it's not skinned already. You can see that because the mesh renderer doesn't have skinned in the name. But we're going to make it when we upload it as a clothing item. So the first thing we do is, again, clothing item settings. We're just going to change this from base female to base male. And again, you'll see the avatar pop up when we do that. This one is probably loose fitting. It's on the cusp between tight, close and loose, just because it's got the jacket on it. So again, upper chest, but I will say this will also cover the left arm and right arm, which is usually sort of that segment there. Finally, we just need to set up the rigging. I'm just going to keep materials always, click rigging. I'm going to use the auto rigger. So you can see here that there's a convert to skin button. We'll just push that button, and it says, we'll just make sure that's aligned to the right thing. So actually, to do the auto rigger, there is one step involved, and that's actually having the template models in the scene. So if we search for the 2015 models, there is also the 2017 models, which are the new ones. In fact, what I can do is drag that into the scene. You can see our new character models here. We'll set that to 0. You can see that that's going to fit okay. There might be some little bit of skin poking through and such. That's perfectly fine because what we've got is underlying skin deletion, which is a technology that sort of strips out the bits that of the avatar that are underneath. So we've got our clothing item again. We just got to convert to skin this time. Just make sure we're aligned against the model. Hit proceed. And there we go. Now that's been automatically skinned and weighted so that the model can be tweaked. Sorry, the model is now sort of compatible with animation. Everything else should be good. We might just click the recalculate bounds. Sometimes you need to do that. It's not a bad thing to do. Otherwise, though, this is now good to go. So just again, virtual good. We're just going to fill out, set the type of clothing category. I guess this is probably still a t-shirt. If you find that something doesn't fit into an existing category, you can actually edit this. You can type in your own categories. The only thing you need to watch for is that new categories have to be approved by our staff. So there may be 1 to 2 days before your item actually appears on the live server, and that's because we've got to approve the category and assign a category code, just to make sure that our store doesn't get overrun with random categories. So we'll just call this one. Oops. Okay. bomber jacket. Again, my personal brand. So this is not for sale, or I might make this free. So if I get 0 on the price, and I'll leave it as 1,000 silver to get this one. We might actually push this one through to the servers. Again, what we're going to do is we're just going to turn this into a prefab. So I've got my folder down here, which is my bomber template. I'm just going to drag this. I'm going to rename this object first. Finally, we're just going to go to the icons, and I'm going to take screenshots. Yes, we'll save that scene. Okay, you can see it's taking the screenshots. Finally, that's all fine. Author, I'm just going to set it to Adam. Upload that. Finally, automatic submission. Ooh, and I did make a mistake, but it's quick. Actually, no, I didn't. That'll be fine. One of the things you might need to do, and this is a step I didn't do, but I probably should have. So I'll just go back to my clothes test scene. And that is, I forgot to hit the prepare button. So just on the submission tab here, you usually have to hit this prepare button first. The server will do the job if it needs to, usually, but just for the sake of safeties, you usually want to do it yourself as well. So just hit the prepare button, and then finally we'll just hit the apply button at the top to write it back to disk. It's equivalent to hitting save, this apply button. Just give it a second to run, it will take a moment. There we go, hit apply. And that's once already uploaded. I'm just going to select the version on disk using that select button, and I'm just going to hit upload again. I'm going to hit automatic submission. Now that probably completes our tutorial. We've done sort of 2 clothing items here, and hopefully that's a sort of good starting point for working with our templates. If there's anything you didn't understand, please feel free to reach out, because our helper chats are usually pretty good at answering along any questions that you have on how to get your content actually uploaded. And if you do run into problems, do also let us know. Hopefully, as I said, that's a useful introduction. And the next one of these we'll do is we'll cover the basics of building a basic region using Unity. And the technology and power you've got there is a bit more substantial than the ones you've got with the in-world build tools. You can create absolutely amazing and stunning scenes inside Unity using our toolkit. With that, I'm going to disappear. But thank you all for watching, and hopefully this was a useful exercise. Thank you.